Good day, everyone, and welcome to our very special webinar. I'm Maureen Grasso from NC State University, and I'm a co-PI on the NC AGEP project. And today we are fortunate enough to have Dr. Leslie Goodyear with us. Just a few housekeeping items. If everyone would put yourself on mute. We are recording this session. And if you have questions, if you would put those in the chat. At the end of Dr. Goodyear's presentation, we will have time for Q&A. She may address some of the questions in the chat as she goes along, or she may wait till the end to address those. In addition to the questions in the chat, when we get to the Q&A, you may raise your hand virtually, and you'll be able to unmute yourself when called upon and ask a question. So today we're pleased to have Dr. Goodyear with us, and she'll be talking about using evaluation for decision making and improvement. Dr. Goodyear is an internationally recognized expert in evaluation and EDC Distinguished Scholar. She's a past president of the American Evaluation Association. She has deep expertise in qualitative inquiry, evaluation ethics, culturally responsive evaluation, evaluation storytelling and other methods of sharing findings, evaluating out of school and informal STEM education programs, and building communities of practice. Dr. Goodyear leads evaluations, facilitates evaluation capacity building, and is an evaluation advisor for clients and colleagues. She is deeply committed to deepening understanding of effective approaches to fostering equity and access in STEM education. And she is a co-principal investigator of the NSF Includes Coordination Hub. Previously, as a National Science Foundation Program Officer, Dr. Goodyear helped build organizational evaluation capacity and was a commissioner of evaluations. She has served as the ethics section editor and associate editor of the American Journal of Evaluation and has been an AEA board member and chair of its ethics committee. She holds a PhD and MS in program evaluation and planning from Cornell University and a BA in developmental psychology from Macalester College. Dr. Goodyear also serves with us on our NC AGEP program as an external advisor. So we are very pleased and fortunate to have her with us today. Dr. Goodyear, the floor is yours.
Maureen, you're more than kind. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for making time to join me today and talk a little bit about evaluation for decision making and improvement. And as Maureen said, I'll do what I hope is not too long a presentation, since Maureen, your bio went on, and I thought we might run out of time. We'll do a presentation, and then I hope we'll engage in dialogue, because I really do want to hear your questions and also some ideas that you have around the content that I'm going to present. So with that, I'm going to jump right in, and please do, I figured out how to have the chat in front of me while I'm presenting today. So if you do have questions as I'm going through, feel free to put them in the chat. And if I'm able to multitask, I'll definitely take them on, and we won't have to wait till the end. So here we go. And now, of course, I'm trying to figure out how this is going to move. So you know who I am. I'm Leslie, and I think about and talk about evaluation all the time. And one of the things I like to do in presentations like this is not just focus on sort of the technicalities of evaluation, but like we're going to talk about today, focus on evaluation use, focus on what is evaluation, focus a little bit more on when you are someone like you are in this alliance or in the other work that you do and you're interacting with an evaluator, what does that mean and how can you make the most of that relationship? So that's what we're going to talk about. How this relates to your work is that I hope you're going to think about what I'm talking about evaluation use in the context of your own AGEP alliance and how you're thinking about evaluation, whether it's with Kathy and Amy as evaluators, or whether it's in your own institutions with the evaluators you work with, or whether it's in your own self-reflection and the type of work that you're doing for self-assessment as part of the AGEP. And what are you going to get from this webinar? I hope some good ideas for thinking about your evaluation work in your AGEP and in your other work. in your institutions, and also a chance to ask questions and dialogue around how you can use evaluation in multiple ways to advance and improve the work that you're doing that is so important for advancing STEM equity in your institutions. So, I'm an evaluator. And I know when I introduce myself to you all, you think, oh, great, another evaluator. And thankfully, there's someone in this world who draws evaluation cartoons that all of us evaluators can use in our presentations. His name is Chris Lisi, and he's really great. But one of the, I'm sure there are other thought bubbles that happen when I say, hi, I'm an evaluator, and I walk into a room or into a project. Sometimes it's, hey, back off. I don't want you to take away my program. Sometimes it's, hey, great. I want help learning what it is we're doing that's going well, and I want help learning what it is that we can improve. But chances are it's, oh, great, another evaluator. And so one of the other things I want to just talk about is, and we'll get to this in a minute, talk about what is evaluative thinking. And so when I introduce myself as an evaluator to you, I hope at some point you're going to say, great, we're going to engage in some really good dialogue around evidence and data, and think together about what do we need to do to improve our program and reach the goals that we're trying to achieve. So that's what I hope turns into the thought bubble for the next time you encounter an evaluator introducing yourself. So first, just a quick and dirty, what is evaluation? I feel like it's always important to put this forward, and we're going to talk in a minute about what are evaluators and who are we. Because so many of you, whether it's in the AGEP Alliance that you're in or in your other work, you're required by funders like NSF and Mark and the AGEP program or others in the other programs of NSF to engage in evaluation. But that doesn't always mean that it's something that you've done before or that you know the bigger picture about it. And I think it's actually important to know the bigger picture of evaluation, to engage in it really thoughtfully, and to use the evaluation processes and findings to actually make a difference in your program. So there's, there's a big stack of literature out there around what is evaluation going back to the 60s. And really, these three areas are the main areas of the evaluation definition. It's a systematic investigation of the quality of programs, projects, and interventions. You can think of them as components, or together, or singly. So in an alliance, you might be evaluating the larger alliance, and you might also be asking questions about each of the activities that you do, or clusters of activities within an institution, or of course, evaluating the efficacy of the model. And what you want to do with evaluation that maybe you wouldn't do with other types of research is really apply what you learn to decision-making, to judgments, to conclusions, and you want to generate new knowledge. And evaluation can also be used to develop organizations and to build capacity. So we'll talk about this in a minute, but really, evaluation is social science research that's action-oriented and values-oriented. So thinking about making judgments and decision-making is about what is the value of something that you're doing, and how do you know it's valuable, and how can you make it more valuable, or how can you make it more successful? And that's that leading to improvement and or accountability, and ultimately contributing to organization or social value. And so in the work you're doing in AGEP, you're really trying to move institutions to be more inclusive and to help students and postdocs and faculty move into really rewarding careers. And that's the organizational and social value. But how you get there and how you improve the way you get there is where an evaluation can really help you to understand how those things come together. So so this is another great cartoon. So yeah, I went to school for social science and yada, yada, yada. Now I'm a program evaluator. So who are we as program evaluators, and what do we do for you in the programs that you run? We're professionals. And feel, and you all in the AGEP program are not who I normally have to say this to, but there's definitely a sense in the world that evaluators are people who just do measurement. That's what we do. We come in, we measure some things, we tell you some stuff that we found, and we collect data, and we tell you whether you reached your outcomes, and we collect surveys. I actually was once in a job interview, and someone said to me, "How did you get a PhD in handing out those surveys after a presentation?" And I thought, that's like not evaluation. That's one piece, is how was that presentation? Then we need to know, what did that presentation mean in the bigger picture? How did that course go? How did that session go? All of that. So we have a lot of roles and backgrounds. Many of us are social scientists. We know how to ask questions. Evaluators are experts in asking really good, meaty, deep questions about what you're doing. And we know how to design those educational studies to get at the answers to those questions. And so many evaluators are measurement experts. And so we know how to take your programmatic hopes and dreams and goals and activities and think about how to measure those results. And to Maureen's intro at the beginning, some of us do that in ways of understanding the meaning of things and understanding the qualitative side of what's happening in a program, and others are experts in measuring things like scales or achievement or scores or the quantitative side of things. And many of us bring those together in the evaluations that we do. And if you've engaged in evaluation before, if you've engaged in evaluation before, I hope you've experienced evaluators as facilitators and communicators. And one of the main jobs that we do is we take the opportunity to facilitate learning with the data that we collect. And we facilitate evaluation use, which is what we're going to talk about in a minute. And then in everything we do, whether it's interacting with you all as the stakeholders of the evaluation, or with the folks who are the participants, or what some people call the beneficiaries of your program, we are active listeners. We frame presentations of findings for audiences so that they can understand what to do with that information. And we tailor what we do for the audiences we're working with. And I just included this link in the slide because the American Evaluation Association, which is the professional association for evaluators, has a lot of great resources for understanding evaluation. And they have a really nice web page on their website that's about what is evaluation. And I think that's a great place to learn more about evaluation. There's two more things I want to say about the profession of evaluation before we get into some of the details of what evaluation can do for you and how facilitating deeper use of evaluation findings can help you make better decisions. So evaluators are guided by ethical guiding principles. And you might have noticed in Maureen's intro that I have a thing for ethics. And I've been involved in the American Evaluation Association's ethics committee and guiding. These are called the ethical guiding principles, the guiding principles working group. I helped to develop the most recent set of ethical guidelines, which these are. There are 5 main ones. One is that we conduct data-based inquiries that are systematic. One is that we are competent. That's an ethical principle. One is that we have integrity and we behave with honesty and transparency. And that guides a lot of the work that we do to make sure that everything we do is accurate, transparent, that we're checking in about the quality of the data that we collect. And then respect for people is around how we treat people, human subjects protections, thinking about the dignity, well-being, and self-worth of the people that we're interacting with in the evaluation. And then the last one is really about striving to advance the common good and equity in society. And those are directly relevant to the AGEP program. You're also trying to do the same things. So just to give you a sense that it's not sort of a open landscape of whatever we want, we call evaluation. Evaluation has some guiding principles. It has a deep theoretical base. And those of us who practice evaluation keep these in mind in everything we do. So there's also developed in 2018 a set of competencies. And I mentioned earlier that evaluations are more than just methodologists. Evaluators need to have competencies in at least these, I guess there are 5 areas of competence. And these were done in a very participatory process over years. These were developed and vetted with members of the association. And as you might notice, methodology, or those what are normally considered the technical skills of an evaluator, are one of many skills that evaluators need to bring. And one of the other ones is interpersonal professional practice. We are pretty good project managers and project planning because we always have deadlines to meet, and understanding the context. And that gets into a little bit more about types of evaluation as well. And I know I'm blowing through this. You're going to get this. You're going to have this available to you, and you're going to have the slides available to you. But what I'm really setting up here is a little bit of understanding about the landscape of why we do what we do and how we do it. And so what can evaluation do for you? And when I always joke, and it'll be later in the presentation as well, that we really hope that you call us early and you call us often, and that you shouldn't really start even if you've already gotten to the point where you've developed your program and you're calling your evaluator. We wish you would have brought us in at the first dream of a program, because we want to help you think about how to define your goals and your outcomes and your activities, and help you develop that theory of change or a logic model to be able to understand where you want to go. And then it's our job to figure out how to measure your progress toward that goal or many goals. And the more you can be in dialogue with an evaluator about that, the better we can do at asking questions and poking and trying to help you open that process up. And then once we do that with you, we collect information to help you improve your programs. And we work with you through facilitated learning opportunities to learn what's being collected and how you can use it to improve. We ask and answer important questions. We're pretty good at that. And we also produce evidence to help you document and demonstrate the outcomes associated with your work. And I know that part sometimes feels like the most important part, like what did we achieve? Did we reach our outcomes? But if you're not learning along the way, you're not going to know how that happened, and you're not going to know how you can improve that for the next time you're trying to do it. And if we're really good at what we do, we also try to make sure and remind you that there are different audiences that you're trying to serve in the work that you're doing. And we help you to understand how those different audiences are experiencing your interventions, your programs, your alliance, your work, so that you can meet their needs in different ways. And we'll talk more about Tom Schwant's work in a bit, but I really love this idea that evaluation ought to begin and end in practical action. So evaluation is not something that we do just for the fun of it, although it is, in my opinion, fun. It's something that we do that's practical action to inform work in order to advance the social good or the common good. So the next slide. So another slide to just talk a little bit more about evaluation, some types of evaluation. You are all probably very familiar, because this is part of the NSF parlance, with formative and summative evaluation. I don't know if folks in the AGEP community have really done much developmental evaluation as well, but formative is really focused on the program improvement. Summative is really focused on the outcomes and the judgments of program success. And developmental evaluation, I always think of developmental evaluation as not just grounded in systems thinking, but as evaluators running alongside and collecting information in real time and feeding it back to you to help you understand your innovations and your decisions in a more dynamic way. So if you think about some of the questions that you might ask as an AGEP PI or staff person or fellow or member of the team, you might say to yourself, why should we build evaluation into our diversity plans? That might be one question you're asking yourself. Why should I engage in evaluation of our work on diversity in our diversity plans? Or what can we learn from evaluation as it relates to the particular activities we're doing in our AGEP? What kind of evaluation should you, in your role, be engaging in to be able to know how to inform your own improvement of your own activities? And how are you going to know whether what you're doing has the intended effects? And so some of the, like that last one is really more of a summative evaluation question. The other ones are real formative evaluation questions, like what am I doing, what's happening because of it, and how am I going to think about that moving forward? If you're going to really think more about that innovation and at the systems level, that's a developmental evaluation. Honestly, these all bleed into each other. They all have elements of each other in them, and you can do all of them, and you don't have to choose one or the other. They all build on each other, and they happen at different sort of times in an organization's maturity. So, the famous quote from Robert Stake, who's one of the elders in the evaluation field, is that formative evaluation is when the cook tastes the soup to decide whether more salt is needed or whether different spices are needed. And summative evaluation is when the guest tastes the soup. And so summative evaluation is really meant to say, all right, so this is done. It's ready to go. Did we get what we thought we needed to get out of this? Were we successful? Formative and more so developmental are meant to say, how is it going? What do we need to change? And I just want to make sure that we touch a little bit on culturally responsive, equity-focused evaluation. I have a little bit of a passion for the idea that when you're working as an AGEP Alliance or in the includes work that I do, in the AGEP Evaluation Capacity Building Conference that I'm the lead of, in any sort of program that is looking to broaden participation in STEM or to bring equity, inclusion, diversity, and accessibility to STEM fields, or basically to interact with anyone who, or any audience who has a diverse base of an audience or representation of multiple voices in the audience that is actually served by the program, we need to be thinking about culturally responsive and equity-focused evaluation. And in my mind, this is just a good tenet of good evaluation. There's no difference, and that good evaluation should always include acknowledgement of the complexity of cultural identity, understanding of the context and the dynamics of power that operate in that context, recognizing and eliminating, to the extent that we can, bias in language, which is a presentation that you all also had from Lisa Merriweather, and we had her talk to the Evaluation Capacity Building Conference as well. And we've had other great conversations among evaluators around the kinds of language we use to describe programs or activities or populations or people participating in programs. We need to employ culturally appropriate methods, culturally responsive methods, and we need to engage community members and evaluation stakeholders from the minute we start all the way through. So that means building in time for dialogue, building in time to listen to different opinions about the same things and to accommodate those spaces to do that. And I just think that that's really important for us to constantly keep in mind. And I know that's important in the AGEP community as well. So evaluation use, I'm just setting these forward because there's a big literature on evaluation use, starting in the 60s and kind of catalyzed by Carol Weiss in the 70s and 80s and Michael Patton. These 4 areas of evaluation use are sort of the categories that most people think of. And this also translates into some work done in other spaces around knowledge utilization or research practitioner partnerships, things like that. But it's interesting to me that like 90% of evaluations and evaluators really want instrumental use. I'm an evaluator. I write some recommendations. I want you to take those recommendations and apply them in your work and change what you're doing. And that is a really nice tight cycle of information. But in fact, a lot of what happens in evaluations is conceptual use. You learn something, you don't really necessarily put that finding or that information to direct use, but maybe you think about it for a little while and it changes how you think about something, or it has influence in what you think you want to do next. Process use of evaluation, it's a weird term. I don't know of a better one, but it's really what happens as you participate in the evaluation. as the team participating in the evaluation with the evaluator. So do you become more data literate because you're engaging with data? Do you start to ask better questions because you're engaging in question asking with the evaluation team and your team in the evaluation? That's process use. That's like learning through the process of the evaluation. And then I hope, and I'm sure you never would, do political or symbolic use of evaluation. And that is the kind of evaluation that like makes us feel bad and makes our heart hurt, because that's when you say, we're doing evaluation. Can't you see we're doing it? And just the fact that we're doing it is enough, and you're actually not doing anything with it. That's those types of evaluations where whatever we do, you just say thank you and you put it on your shelf behind you and you never look at it again. And you just tell your funder or you tell your community, we've had an evaluation, and that seems to be enough. We want more than that. So that's sort of at the bottom of the use categories. So what I really want to talk about today, and I felt like we just needed to get here with some of those definitions of evaluation use, is I really want us to think as a community in the AGEP community and in the sort of STEM and STEM equity community about evaluation thinking as evaluation use. I know that I'm not the only evaluator who's passionate about helping the programs and the organizations that I work with to think in an evaluative way. And that means sort of building. So evaluative thinking is one of those things that's really hard to define, but it has a lot to do with critical thinking, analytic reflection, the appraisal of assumptions and claims. If you're a social scientist, if you're a scientist, if you're an academic in an academic institution, these are things that we're expected to do all the time. But evaluative thinking is really bringing that values piece to it, not just whether something has value, but the values that are embedded in what you're doing and thinking about them with an openness, an inquiry habit of mind, an ongoing process of questioning and reflecting and learning and modifying, being open to that creative tension in this quote to go beyond just collecting data for accountability purposes, but to think of the evaluation engagement that you have as learning for change. I love that, going beyond the sort of the time and activity bound processes of monitoring and evaluation, and thinking about evaluation and the work we do together as learning for change. And how can you then take that into the work that you do in your program and think about how you might want to have meetings differently, how you might want to engage differently in the activities that you're doing. So if we think about evaluative thinking as evaluation use, then we can also, I remember reading this article, it's in New Directions for Evaluation, it's by Tom Schwant. I always love his work because it always makes me think, and I think my head exploded when I read this article, which was, normally we think of like critical thinking and even evaluative thinking as an individual act. I'm thinking critically, I'm thinking evaluatively, but I love the idea that it's a social practice. And that's why I keep saying, when we do this together, evaluative thinking is not something that you go off and do on your own with the data in front of you. Evaluative thinking is a social practice that we engage in together to appraise the value of strategies and actions. Our strategies, our innovations, our plans, and our programs. We engage together to make collective sense making, to understand how what we're doing is situated in the contexts and the norms and the values and routines of our organization and the organizations we're trying to influence. And the reason I'm passionate about this is I think evaluators have a role in facilitating this if we have that opportunity in these settings. And I feel like using evaluation findings for decision making is not a linear process of, I've got some data, I'm going to use it, sort of back to that instrumental use that I mentioned before. It's not as though I say, thank you so much for sharing that the charts and tables and graphs and quotes from the folks that you surveyed and interviewed, and now I will put those data to use. We need to make meaning of them, and that is part of that evaluative thinking, and we need to do that together so that we can make decisions. And I loved this part of it is, what should we do is the question that evaluative thinking sort of asks you to engage with. Is you make judgments, you have conversations, you are collaborating, and then you say, you have your data, you have the evidence, and you say, and what should we do? And I think that implies, what should we do together? So developing good answers to the question, what should we do, is what practical reasoning and evaluation is all about. That idea that we're doing practical action from beginning to end. And we, as evaluators, want to help answer the question, what should we do? And so the questions that were posed in this particular piece were the kinds of questions that can help you make decisions. So you take the information and the facilitated conversations that you have had with your evaluators, and you talk with them and with yourselves about, what do we want to achieve? Where are we going with this work? And here's what the power question is: who gains and who loses by the actions that we take? Which mechanisms of power influence those results? Which mechanisms of power influence where we're going, what we want to achieve? When something happens in your program, asking yourselves and your evaluator, was this development desirable? And what should we do about it? So maybe you have a real spike in attendance at something. That sounds like a great thing, but you probably should ask, what does this mean? And should we do more? Should we do less? What should we do? And then I really think it's important to say, what are our participants experiencing and how can we learn from them? So not just, are they achieving the things we wanted them to achieve, but I always ask this question in every evaluation I do: at what cost are they achieving them? Is it hard to get to those outcomes that we hope them to get to? And how are they experiencing that path? And that matters to an AGEP program and an AGEP alliance, because we want to know, what does it take to get through to being faculty in the institutions you want folks to be faculty and successful faculty? And how is that experience? And then, of course, you're going to ask yourselves, I hope, how can we improve? And what can we do to make that happen? That's the meat of everything. I feel like I always have to leave with some takeaways, and these are things I think that matter, no matter whether you're doing evaluative thinking or not. And I'm going to just kind of sum up the whole thing, that I want you to communicate early and often with your evaluator, whether it's in this AGEP or whether it's in any other work that you do with evaluators. The second thing, it's a relationship, so approach it that way. Good evaluators approach the relationship of being in collaboration with our programs that we work with as a relationship. Ask good questions, ask big questions, ask hard questions, ask questions that are hard to answer, and have your evaluator figure out how to collect data with you so that you can answer those questions. Foster evaluative thinking in the work that you do, and always plan your evaluation work with your evaluator with use in mind. So we can think of all kinds of fun technical things to do in an evaluation, but what are we going to do when we have those data? How are we going to use them? What decisions will they help us make? What will happen if we don't use them? Why are we collecting those data? That's what I mean by plan with use in mind. Focus on reflecting, learning, and improving, and measuring more than just outcomes. And here's one that just matters so much to me. We focus so much on outcomes. Just remember, those outcomes are humans. And in the work that we do in education, outcomes are humans. And so measuring outcomes means collecting data about humans and their lives. So let's make sure we're doing it as holistically as we possibly can. So the context and the culture and equity matter. Keep those front and center. Understand all of those issues around what's the context this is happening in, what cultures are being brought to bear on this situation, and how can we have equity at the fore in everything we're doing. And then, of course, be flexible and responsive, and please engage in creativity with evaluators. I love that, when we can think creatively about how to solve both programmatic and evaluation questions together. And then, like I've said before, evaluation use can happen in all phases of the evaluation. So engage with your evaluator in a very robust and creative fashion to be able to use all that they can offer you, and to engage with them at a deeper level than just asking them to create and distribute surveys and give you back data that you may or may not use. So as you can tell, I'm passionate about all of these things, and I would really love to hear some questions. I just see a question from Marcia in the chat. Marcia, is it okay with you if I turn off the share so that I can see more faces? Maureen, does that work for you too?
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Now I have to figure out how to do that. There we go. There's stopping the share. Great. Thanks everybody for attending. Can you adjust Marcia asked the question. Do you want to just ask it, Marcia, rather than me reading it from the chat?
Okay. Yeah. So I was asking if you could address the tension between honest evaluation and the need to present your program in a good light.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean by present the program in a good light, and where you're feeling that tension?
Well, so there, but by some you may measure a lot of different things, and some things come out in a positive way, and some things come out showing not very much change. Your interactions with people and your sense of whether things are moving quickly or slowly, you might have one sense about it, but when you're reporting to the world, to your funders, to all of that, you have this I don't know, sometimes a real need, sometimes a perceived need to just present the positive.
Yeah. I feel like that's a real stress for a lot of programs. You are not the only ones who feel that tension.
Yeah.
And I feel like it helps to think about the different kinds of evaluation when you're thinking about that. So in the world of formative evaluation, not everything should be good. You can't, like if everything was good, why would you improve? You are like looking for the information that helps you to understand how it's going and to improve and to try things and to see how they go. And that's both developmental evaluation and formative. In a summative evaluation, you're looking to make a judgment about, was this program a good program, right? And I would push back in terms of thinking about, like, I was a program officer at NSF, and I had this little soapbox that I dragged around the country with me every time I'd go to conferences. This was in pre-pandemic days, that said, please tell me what went wrong, please. And that goes back to that knowledge utilization function of evaluation, or that knowledge generation function. If you never admit to anyone, your funder included, that anything went not quite as planned, no one gets to learn about how things really are. And we all know that in the sciences, nothing goes exactly as planned. Maybe not nothing, but that sometimes, you do an experiment for a very long period of time, and then it just doesn't show the results that you wanted it to. Well, is that a failure or is that a learning? And I do think, like, the more that you can feel like we're presenting what it might not be positive in a way of engaging with it as learning, that I think is a really valuable thing to engage in. And I don't know if that ameliorates the tension or the stress of trying to present things in a positive light, but I do think shifting it a little bit to saying some really great things are happening, we know that, and we're building on them, but we're also learning from the ways in which these things are not happening, maybe over here. Why? What's the context? What are the cultural elements? What are the power elements? What are the inputs? What are the resources over there? What are the, all of the questions you might ask that help you decide why something's not going as well in one place as it is in another. So I would just kind of encourage you to reframe to learning rather than to always having to present in a good light. And I know personally that NSF is looking for that, but I don't know how that feels on the ground for every program. I don't know, Marcia, if that addresses your.
Yeah, it does. And I think particularly in working on diversity issues that where change can be really slow, it's sometimes seems like there's a little bit of a disconnect between seeing the progress that you see is so incremental sometimes. It's a little hard to see progress sometimes.
Yeah. And do you think that you guys are the only ones who have slow incremental progress in these areas? Right. Or that maybe there's something to dig, to ask those sort of evaluative thinking questions about, like, what are our expectations for the speed at which things will change match to how things really are in this institution or this context? And what do we need to do to align those? Might be a question too. And that's, I think, also where it comes into hearing lots of different voices to explain what's happening and to inform what's happening.
But another question I have is for so I'm the chair of our diversity committee in our department, and there's so we'd like to do some evaluation of what our work has, the impact of our work. And the first thought that comes to mind is to do a survey, but there's some exhaustion in the department with surveys. And so I'm wondering if you have thoughts about ways to build into a program, into initiatives, evaluation activities that don't necessarily involve surveying people.
I think that there's a lot of expertise on this call right now, as I'm looking around all the squares here about that as well. I don't know, Kathy, Teresa, Carla, Lisa, others want to make any suggestions?
Well, you might get people willing to do a focus group where someone comes in and talks with a set of people in the department for an hour or two. And maybe you guys have a big department. You might need a series of focus groups to get some qualitative understanding of how people are thinking. Something like that. And I'm not like trying to gin up business, but those sorts of things tend to happen better when an outsider's facilitating the group, because people may be unwilling to speak their minds to a peer or to a colleague, or particularly somebody higher up than a colleague. So that would be one way. If you're looking at student data, there's you could make systemic processes that you build in so that they're just part of your work, like an exit interview when people leave, whether they graduate or just go away or tell you they're leaving or whatever, and find out some of the things that go along with that. And if it's systemic, then it's not like you're picking on anybody. So if you're director of graduate programs, every single time somebody leaves, whether they graduate or whatever, you talk to them for half an hour and then document whatever they said. And it's even better if you use some sort of script while not sounding stilted. Again, you can take that information a lot. And I'm a big proponent, and Marcia and I've talked about this, about using the comments on those surveys that we've already done, we'll talk about analyzing them more completely, but even without analyzing them, I could tell when I separated the comments just by department, you could sort of tell which departments were kind of nice places to be and which departments were places that, wow, I'm not sure I'd like to study there either. So
Right.
just by the content of the, people would talk about either they didn't have any money or their advisor was bad, or they're only funded for 2 years, but it takes 4, or the department head wouldn't listen to me when I went to him with a problem. And those kinds of things all seem to cluster, like within departments, things like that did seem to cluster in ways that I didn't really expect. Whereas other comments might be, oh, it's great, they have all these different resources to help me through, and I like having my peer mentor, the older people in my research group who kind of showed me the ropes and stuff like that. So you can sort of get an idea of culture just by using data you've already got. And I'm a huge fan of using data that somebody else has already collected. Like at NC State, I know they've got a sophomore survey, a senior survey, probably some kind of grad student survey, EPA, SPA. They got all these surveys already out there. And I think they'll give you your own results. And trying to mine some of the other data that other people have already collected, so you don't have to do your own survey, as a way to at least as a starting. Whoops, you got all the boxes shifted. At least as a starting point, you could take the data that's out there, and then you could maybe narrow down or figure out what questions those other things didn't answer for you, and then do something very focused in terms of trying to find out what the issues are that you might be facing.
Yeah.
Did that help your question, Marcia? Is that what you?
Yeah, thanks.
I think
Right.
one other quick thing, Marcia, I would just add, and I know Teresa, you have your hand up too, is I don't know what you want to measure for the diversity work that you're doing. And so to Kathy's point, there are lots of great ways to go about doing it. But the question is what you're measuring looking to understand people's experiences, people's time, like something that's measurable by a scale, something that's measurable by a conversation in terms of understanding experience? Are you looking to find out whether the work that you've been doing as the diversity committee has changed the culture of the department or has changed particular specific things in the department? And that would drive as well. And one other thought, and all of this depends on how much you want to invest in doing this, is to think a little bit about having someone do some observations of different gatherings in the department, and to basically do some sort of observations of what the culture and the context are like, and whether it, and get people's opinions about that as well. So to me, it all depends on what you want to measure. And Kathy, you obviously know more about that than I do, but it depends on sort of what you're trying to achieve with that diversity committee work and what it is you're looking to understand is happening. And Teresa, I know you had your hand up there.
Well, I was just going to say that at first, Kathy, I'm sorry, I'm the one. I clicked that button. I didn't know it was going to shift all the boxes. When I clicked raise my hand, it like shuffled everything. So I apologize for that. But what I was going to say, Marcia, is it really, I think one of the things we often forget is to use data that we already have around us. And that's kind of what Kathy was saying. Survey fatigue is true across everybody, meaning, in fact, one of the strategies we've been doing is when we do our annual interview, so we interview the different people in our group, is we have short little survey stuff that we want to know the answer to, but we do it almost as a part of the interview. While they're with us, we say, by the way, we had this little thing we need you to fill out so we understand. And they say, well, I'll do that later. And I say, oh, no, we'll wait for you. We're not in a hurry. And we do it right then, because nobody will ever come back to that survey. Nobody does surveys. In fact, I'm sure all of us on this call just delete them all the time when they come through on our bulk email in our university systems. Every now and then somebody's willing to do it, but for the most part, nobody wants to do them. So I think what Leslie said about the observational, and I think what Kathy was saying about looking at what's already being collected and how things may already be embedded. The one thing I will argue that's a challenge and can't go away, it's just a limitation, is sometimes when we do these observations and stuff, we don't really know if the changes we're observing are because of what we did or because of other things that have happened. So there's colleges where there have been changes in deans and department heads and different things at different institutions. it changes things, climate and all kinds of stuff. In the middle, you're doing a project, right? A 5-year project. You're wanting to know, how is my project impacting? And yet all around you, you have these things changing on your campus, right?
Yeah.
And you're kind of going, okay, how do I do? So I would argue that, I mean, and we do this in qualitative research a lot, you have to basically articulate and couch those limitations that exist because we can't control them. But you're right, doing a survey. And the other thing is just to try to keep them real short, obviously, but even short ones, nobody clicks on. I'll share. So we're, Maureen and I are on this, they're trying to put together the AGEP conference, right? Coming up in Corpus Christi, just getting individuals to fill out, how do you like to communicate in a conference setting is like, I mean, literally, we have 35 responses right now. There should be at least 100, right? But nobody wants to click and answer the buttons. And I understand why. Part of it is we don't know what we're getting into when we click that button, right? We don't know. They told us it's going to be 3 minutes, but it's really going to be more like 15. And I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying that's what we're thinking in our head. So as we look at our own institutions, I say we're not always digging into the data we already have. And I think we're overlooking our observational data that's coming in from around us, and utilizing those external groups to kind of tell us, how can we get at this better? Because I'm fortunate, I'm an internal evaluator working on a team, but we've got a group that's the external working with us, and it makes for a really nice a way of approaching it. That's my 2 cents worth, Leslie.
Yeah, that's great, Teresa. I just want to add 2 quick little things. I think you hit on something important for us to highlight, which is, I wish we could give up, and I mean this loosely, but I mean this seriously, give up on causality when it comes to these types of things. There is no causality because life is complicated and humans are complicated and interactions are complex, and the factors that go into whether things work the way we hope they do are some in our control and most not. And so a long time ago, everybody on my team knows I just hate the word impact. It just is not, by the way, I also feel like it's a little bit on the violent side, like I've been impacted by something like a meteor or something like that. But I like the word influence, because the word influence means that there are many more than just you influencing this, right? And so how is it that your work is influencing the department or the program or the larger alliance or the participants, acknowledging that there are other influences on those? And so maybe what people call like a contribution analysis or understanding the influence can help to uncover what's really happening. And maybe that other thing that you have no control over, like the new dean or the new provost or the new whoever, has more influence than you'll ever have with whatever it is you're doing. And you need to figure that out and connect to it, right? So I want to make sure, Cameron, I think you were first, or I wasn't sure who. Carla, did you put your hand up first? I don't know who. Go, one of you. One of you go ahead.
Really quick comment to what Teresa said, which was, sometimes I feel like if you just say, this is our plan, but if you like a different mode, fill this out, then that's going to encourage people to do it. Because you could just say like, this is our default plan, but if you'd like a different mode of communication, fill this out. Because that way, I do that with meetings all the time now. I'm so sick of doodle polls that I just say like, hey, I'm going to set the meeting for Friday. Here's 3 times. If we can't find a time in those 3 times, then I'll send out a doodle poll. And it's amazing how quickly things happen just by encouraging people who have an opposition thought versus just like, what do you guys think? Because people who don't care don't want to fill it out.
Great point. Carla?
Thanks. I just want to go back to surveys. If really survey is something that you really want to do, Marcia, faculty overall are the worst audience to fill surveys. I mean, I work with farmers, and when I have worked with faculty are worse. But what it works, because it seems that we are cheap too, is incentives. And doesn't have to be something very, very expensive. I mean, you know, $20 a gift card, and we will answer the survey. Really, I mean, it's, I just wanted to say that.
Right. So other questions?
I wanted to go back to surveys. I think there's something to be said about department culture, even as it relates to responding to surveys. In some of our surveys, we had something like 80% of the students responded, and in other departments, it was like 40. You know, these are spread at 3 different institutions and all that, but that's a fairly huge gap of groups of people who wish to have their, you know, experiences heard. And I do think there's some also, when we go back to culture, I think the departments that had a lot of international students, I think they may have thought they had to fill out the survey. So there would be like really high response rates from those departments, but it does go back to culture. If people have something they want to say, they'll take this opportunity. I don't care what question you ask, this is what I'm going to tell you.
And Kathy, I'm going to add on to that. I think you get strong opinions. So for example, we will fill out the survey if we have a strong opinion, positive or negative, pick a direction. If we're right in the middle, then we'll just let other people fill out the survey, right? And so I have to wonder if some of those, when we send out those surveys, it tell in a weird way from an evaluation standpoint, it can send us a little bit of a message. Not that it's scientific, but it does send us a message. And maybe who sends out the survey sometimes affects it too.
So to bring it, well, sorry, Kathy, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, when I do surveys, I always try to get a respected person, for lack of a better term, to send the survey invitation. Nobody's gonna answer a survey from me. I mean, generally, but if their department chair or the president of the university, I don't know who the respective person is in each place, but hopefully culturally, you know who the respective person is. If Marcia and John are wondering why I kept asking for somebody else to send out the invitation, that's because, oh, well, the department chair thinks it's important, I guess I better do it. Or whoever's the respected person in the group, to help gin up response rate. Works better for students than faculty.
Yeah. I want to just, like, since we have 1 minute left, I want to just bring us back to, I'm going to ask the evaluative thinking question about this question. So Marcia, what do you want to know and what do you want to do with what you learn for the diversity committee? So like all of us, we definitely have ideas about how best to collect that information, but the real evaluative thinking and the evaluation use question is, okay, so you're doing stuff as the diversity committee. What do you need to know to make your work better? And what are you going to do with that information when you get it? And what kind of steps do you envision taking to be able to change what you're doing? And that this gets to, like, I've had clients before who are like, well, we're not going to change. Well, like, well, then why are you collecting information from people to tell you what's better and what's worse if you're not actually going to change? And so one of the conversations maybe to have with your committee is to say, if we go about evaluating, and I put it in quotes, our work as the diversity committee, what do we need to know? What are we going to do with that? And what will we be willing to change in order to make it better? So that pulls us back to those bigger questions of the evaluative thinking and the evaluation use, and then do it together, right? In that social interaction of evaluative thinking, so that it's in interaction with folks like Kathy and Teresa and Cameron and Carla and everyone else on this call, who are the ones who can collect the information and then help you to think through what it means for what your diversity committee would do. So
on that note, I want to thank our speaker, Leslie Goodyear. I think your ending questions really resonate with me as I'm thinking about work with faculty and their programs. Asking those questions is going to be very helpful. So thank you, everyone, and thank you to our speaker.
No, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for the attention, and thanks for the really good discussion at the end there. And I promised Marcia, I will put the citations in the slides next, which I didn't have time to do, and then I'll send them to Marcia and she'll include them with the recording. And you all know where to find me. It's on the last slide. So, and I know so many of you from the ECBC, and thanks so much. Call me. I'm open to conversations about all of this. So thanks.
Great. Thank you very much.
So much.